Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the monthly meeting of Board of Directors Monterey One Water, and we'll call this meeting to order and have a roll call, please.
Marina Coast,
Here.
Monterey,
Here.
Veranda,
Here.
Castroville,
Here.
County of Monterey,
Here.
Delray Oaks,
Here.
Pacific Grove,
Here.
Salinas,
Here.
Sand City,
Here.
Seaside.
Here.
All right, thank you very much. We get to agenda item 3, Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll ask my vice chair to lead us. Pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Williamson. We get to agenda item 4, additions to the agenda. Look to Mr. Sciutto. Are there any additions to the agenda?
There are no additions to the agenda.
Okay, very good. We move on to agenda item 5, which is approval of the agenda. We'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you very much. Any member of the public wishing to comment on the item? And if you are out there, our one attendee on Zoom, use your hand raised feature if you wish to comment. All right, seeing none. Since Director Church is coming to us on Zoom, we have to do everything by roll call. So if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Marina Coast,
Yes?
Monterey,
Yes.
Veranda,
Yes.
Castroville,
Yes.
County of Monterey,
Yes, and put the blame on me, Chair.
Delray Oaks,
Yes.
Pacific Grove,
Yes.
Salinas,
Yes.
Sand City,
Yes.
Seaside.
Aye.
No problem with delays there. Everyone is voting quite quickly tonight. All right, thank you very much. The agenda is approved. We go to agenda item 6, public comments. Anyone wishing to address the board on matters not appearing on the agenda may do so now for not more than 3 minutes. Comments on any other matter listed on the agenda are welcome at the time the matter is being considered. Anyone from the public or from Zoom land? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 7, the consent agenda. Does any director wish to pull anything from consent? All right, I don't see any member of the public wishing to pull anything from consent. All right, not seeing anything. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Any member of the public wishing to comment on the motion? Seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote, please.
Marina Coast,
Yes.
Monterey, Veranda,
Yes.
Castroville,
Yes.
County of Monterey,
Aye.
Delray Oaks,
Yes.
Pacific Grove,
Yes.
Salinas,
Yes.
Sand City,
Aye.
Seaside.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. We move on to agenda item 8A, Budget and Personnel Committee. Anyone care to make a motion to receive the draft minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Go out to the public. Folks in Zoom, if you use your Zoom raise hand function, if you wish to comment. All right, seeing none, we'll come back and ask for a roll call vote.
Marina Coast,
Yes.
Monterey,
Yes.
Veranda,
Yes.
Castroville,
Yes.
County of Monterey,
Aye.
Delray Oaks,
Yes.
Pacific Grove,
Yes.
Salinas,
Yes.
Sand City,
Aye.
Seaside.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. We get to agenda item 8B, and that is the Recycled Water Committee, but that meeting was canceled, so there are no draft minutes to receive. In which case, we move on to informational items, 9A. Sciutto.
Yes,
Actually, Dave Lindau's as a panelist, and we'll be providing this update.
Go ahead, Mr. Lindau.
yes. Chair Moore and board members, can you hear me okay?
Not really. Yes.
Okay. So while Chai is putting up some slides of current construction activity, I'll touch on the existing water production. So since inception to date, we're at 14,650 acres. April looks like a very strong month, about 310 acre feet for the month of April. And that brings the accounting year, if you remember, July 1st through June 30th is the accounting year per the water purchase agreement. At the end of April, we'll be at 3,310 acre feet, almost guaranteeing that by the end of June, the 3,500 acre foot obligation will be met. So real positive news there. On expansion, again, just a quick reminder of the goals and objectives of expansion. Next slide, please. Again, the crown jewel, the AWPF. Next slide, please. And again, while there isn't much construction happening at the facility right now, we wanted to highlight that in the near future, some of the process equipment will be arriving. It'll be able to be plugged in from a piping perspective, instrumentation, etc. But the critical path of this project, which is similar to the injection well phase 4, is the major electrical equipment. So that isn't going to be arriving until the end of this calendar year and into 2025. Next slide, please. The big news for injection well phase 4 is that HDD, horizontal directional drilling pipeline that we installed at 2,800 linear feet of 20-inch. You can see it called out there, the phase 4 HDD section. That was successfully completed. That was a relatively high risk piece of this construction project. Happy to say that went off without a hitch. Upcoming will be that 1.9 mile length of pipe, 24-inch ductile iron pipeline from the Black Horse Reservoir down to the eastern well field. And then ultimately the eastern well field will be connected to the western well field. Next slide, please. So the contractor is stockpiling his transmission pipeline materials. Next slide. Also showing up on the side is some of our 24-inch stainless steel injection well casing. So if you may remember back when we had the pandemic, et cetera, and there were supply.
I'm sure Dave was going to say supply chain issues.
Dave,
Oh, Dave, are you back?
Did you lose me?
Yes, go ahead.
briefly.
I was just saying that this previous phase of this project, this was one of the material items that held up construction, and now we've got what we need to do the first injection well. Last slide, please. And you can see they're mobilizing the drill rig for the new monitoring well. This will be the 9th monitoring well out in the well fields, 9th and hopefully the last monitoring well we need to install. With that, I'd hand it back to the chair for any questions on expansion construction.
Thanks, Dave. I think if I can jump in real quick, something tangential to the expansion and all that. As you all or may well know, we've been in the middle of a CPUC proceeding specifically to supply and demand of water in the Monterey Peninsula. That is ongoing. Just want to inform the board, we are preparing an opening brief to be submitted tomorrow, just clarifying some of the facts that we have put into testimony over the time frame of the proceeding, but wanted to emphasize because during the hearing part of it, there was some misunderstanding of some of our existing testimony. So that will go in tomorrow. Best and Krieger is preparing that for us, and staff has been reviewing it.
Thank you very much. Any directors, any questions of Mr. Lindau or General Manager Scioto? Vice Chair Williamson.
Just as a follow-up to that, when are we anticipating the completion of that? Is it the end of the summer?
Of the monitoring well?
Sorry, the CPUC.
I think the CPUC proceeding, Dave. So my understanding is we have our opening briefs that go in. There's some period of time and reply briefs can be put in on all of those on the opening briefs. And then there's some period of time a proposed decision comes up where comments can be made. and then there's the final decision. So in CPUC schedule land, I'm assuming it's at least the middle to end of summer.
Yeah, and I'd say probably late fall, but
Okay. The more realistic person there.
The end of the year.
I don't want to get your hopes up. Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
My question is, when you submit those briefs, can you send them to the board as well, just so we have it for information in case we're asked like what position the agency took, we're able to reference that.
Absolutely. We will send it to the entire board. And there's nothing that, in my opinion, that controversial on this one. It's actually all the testimony that we've already submitted is what we're referencing. But I think it would be a great idea for the board to understand where we're at.
All right. Any further questions? Any questions from the public? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 9B, a presentation on the Monterey Renewable Energy and Electrical Utility Reliability Study, which is joint with Regen Monterey.
So Tom, I'll just give a brief introduction and then we'll kick it over to Matt. As you know, we've been doing this joint study with Regen, and Felipe and Guy are both here. Actually, I've noticed that we have a full house almost, and 6 of them have to do with this item. So we've been working for a while on this feasibility study. It has morphed and changed throughout the history of the project. An update was provided to the Regen board a little over a week and a half ago. And we now have a study. So this is sort of definitely a milestone in this project that you've been hearing about. I know Ron has been sitting on the ad hoc committee for the duration. Bill and Tom have joined that committee for 1 meeting. So I'm just really happy that we're at this point and hopefully have some clarity on options moving forward that is structured and that we can do it together. And hopefully we do go hand in hand and do what is best for this community. But there's also options that we can both do our own separate thing, which I think is critical, being that we are both, separate entities. But with that, this is truly a starting point of trying to optimize our energy resources. And it's something that, as you all know, we feel is critical for us moving forward, particularly with all the advanced water purification demands on electricity, as well as regulatory issues that Regen faces with SB 1383 and the organic side of things. So I think we can certainly complement each other, as well as do something that's good for this community and the environment. With that, I'll kick it out to Matt, who will provide some more detailed information, and then GHD is here and will be doing the most of the presentation.
Thank you, Paul. Good evening, directors. I'm Matt Thompson, your new Director of Engineering. My group will be tasked with implementing many of the recommendations made in this renewable energy and electrical reliability study. Before I introduce Kim, who will be giving you a full presentation, I'd like to point out that there are numerous expensive projects recommended by this study. These projects will take many years to complete, likely 10 years or more. There's a strong business case for each of these projects. These projects will greatly improve reliability of our operations and help minimize our liabilities. We also have an opportunity to reduce our agency's greenhouse gas emissions and do our part to address climate change. Like we have seen with major infrastructure programs such as Pure Water Monterey, if we take initiative, we stay on the leading edge of technology and become a model for other agencies to follow, I believe we will likely benefit from state and federal grant opportunities, which could greatly offset the cost of these projects. But it all starts with a good plan. So I'd like to introduce Kim Domptail.
Sorry, Matt.
Yes.
Can we jump and ask Felipe if you'd like to say a few words before we jump into the study?
Sure.
If you want, you don't have to.
Sure.
I don't want to put you on the spot, Felipe, with all of like 3 seconds notice.
Right.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Felipe Melcher. I'm the General Manager at Regen Monterey. I too, and staff time, we'll just jump on Paul's introduction. I'd like to thank the staff. I'd like to thank GHD, all the technical experts, Tamsin, Guy, Derek. They put a lot of time and effort on top of normal work to go look into the innovation and the future. And as Matt mimicked and talked about, climate solutions, energy opportunities. And as Paul referenced, I think we're scratching at the surface. We'll need some time for the agencies to analyze the study. It is a study, so we want to study the study and see where our best opportunities are at. And there's some that are already in play now. They're already being seen through, and there's additions that could be complemented to them. So I'd like to send appreciation to both organizations, directors, for the support that they've given us. It's been 18 months worth of study. Not every agency has the ability to go out and study and look at what those best business cases and best opportunities are. As Director Moore referenced before, we want to see a good business case. We want to see the financials that tie to it, and then the results that flow for the community and for everybody that's using the services that are needed. Both agencies are providing services that the public needs and wouldn't be able to do without. So at this point, I'd like to just thank everybody involved in the process, and that we continue to stay interested as we take a time to kind of investigate what's best for the organization to go singular, and then what's best for the organizations to maybe approach again jointly. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities, but there's also dollars that are associated to that, and they are front-loaded dollars, and it's significant. Don't get scared. We got time, and I think we can do this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Felipe.
All right. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Kim Domtail. Kim is an environmental engineer who leads the Future Energy Group at GHD, which is the engineering firm our agency in Regen hired about 2 years ago to prepare this study. Kim is part of an excellent team that prepared this study, many of which are with her this evening. Also with us this evening is Derek Wurst of the engineering firm Black & Veatch. Derek brought a third-party perspective and helped us bring this study across the finish line. And I'm sure that between all of us here, we'll be able to answer any questions that you may have. So at this point, Kim, if you want to take over. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. Before I dive into the results, I'll give, brief history of the study and an overview, and then we'll dive into the results. So I think Chai is uploading the slides. And, there's a long report and a lot of appendices. I will try to stick to about half an hour for the results. I will do most of the presentation. I want to acknowledge, the full GHD team and technical experts that conducted the studies. Tonight, we have Mike Toker, Jack Sutton in the audience that will be available for the Q&A section. So with that, if we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is the initial vision for the joint feasibility study. As you can see, it was the vision to best leverage the infrastructure and resources of both agencies in terms of landfill gas, digester gas, the organics received by both agencies, potentially additional solar, battery storage, potential wind, to really achieve energy resiliency. Next slide, please. That vision started several years ago, in late 2017. And then a couple years after, the two boards formed the joint ad hoc committee that has been, receiving regular updates. We started our study in basically early 2023, and today we have, I'll try to present the final results of this initial phase. Next slide, please. This is the full team. So, again, on behalf of the GHD team, also thank you to the two boards, to Paul and Felipe here, really all the staff of both agency, Tammy, Guy, Jennifer, and Matt now taking over, and all the consultants as well, Derek from Black & Veatch and Gary Darling who may be on the line. So thanks everyone. I mean, it's been an exciting project for us, really great opportunities for both agencies. So I'm happy to present the results tonight. Next slide, please. So before the results, I don't want to scare the board, but we have a list of acronyms. So if we can go to the next slide, please. I'm not going to read through them, and I'll try to avoid using too many acronyms, but we'll definitely talk about the CapEx, for the cost estimates, and the RNG, renewable natural gas. I may use that, and SCFM as a unit for the gas flow. So, but we'll try to avoid the too many acronyms, too many jargon, but it's available for reference. Next slide, please. So this is the overall approach for the study. It starts, if we start at the top with the blue boxes, we look first at the electrical network. What is the current and future energy use of both agencies? What are the objectives? And we define a strategic option as a base case electrical network. Second, we look at the ongoing co-digestion project at M1W and the requirements at the RTP and potentially for pre-processing. Third, we looked at the best uses for the biogas resources, which include both landfill gas and digester gas. And fourth, looking at the back end, what to do with the biosolids, and we review a number of management options for the biosolids. If you do one more click, please. You see additional arrows popping up, and that shows really the interdependency between all these analyses, right? They're not separate analysis done in the vacuum. They inform this kind of like a feedback loop, if you will, and when you choose one option, it impacts the study. So that was one of the fun part of this study. I was going to say challenge, but definitely, so that's also the opportunity that you have here. And then, at the bottom, putting it all together and looking for the path to implement all that. And I'll pass it back to Matt at the end to really focus on the next steps. Next slide, please. So we'll start with the electrical network. Next slide. So about a year ago, we met with the agency staff and identified really the guiding principles for the study. I think we can group them into three main pillars. One is really achieving, energy reliability. Operational resiliency for both agencies is key, having a safe, secure power distribution system, being independent from the utility. That's really the strong driver and first pillar. Second, it's about limiting the impact on the environment, right? And leveraging sustainable sources as much as possible, using, the biogas in the best way, contributing to state and federal initiatives, such as the organic diversion mandate, and preserving landfill capacity. And a third pillar is around the project economics and increasing revenues as much as possible and decreasing operational costs. So these were the guiding principles throughout. If we go to the next slide, please. For the electrical network in particular, 4 modes of operations were identified as needed to achieve these objectives. The top row, if you will, is kind of like the current state, with both agencies operating independently of each other, either with the utility to import or export, in the case of region, power to the grid, or without the grid and functioning in an island mode. Bottom line, if you will, is kind of like future state where the agencies also have the capability of operating together collectively, again, either with the utility or without as an island. Next slide, please. So to achieve this, this is the proposed electrical network. At the bottom here, you see the ongoing project, interconnecting region power generation facility with M1W AWPF. And then in the future, we propose to extend this interconnection to the RTP and the SVRP and other facilities, And that would also enable you to consolidate the PG&E drops in one location instead of having multiple drops and thus avoiding some standby charges. So this is the proposed base gas electrical network that can be built over time. And the 21 kV power is ongoing currently. Next slide, please. So to develop this network, here is the proposed infrastructure and cost estimates. You can see the top line item in black is more pertaining to the region system with new gen sets and corresponding building and equipment. There's two columns here for CapEx, and it's a little bit hidden the title, but it's CapEx and then CapEx plus, where we just basically add design contingencies and sales tax, contractors overhead and general conditions, etc. So that's the, yeah, thank you. Second column. So I'll use these numbers. So region cost item, you can see it was 33 million. And then in green, different improvements for M1W that can happen over time. New combined heat and power unit, CHPs, when the current one needs to be replaced, extending the interconnection to the RTP and SVRP, as I described in the previous slide, and then potentially some battery energy system storage and additional solar photovoltaic. So you see total estimated cost of 131 million for all these infrastructure improvement on the electrical network. Again, that can be phased over time and implemented over the next 10 years or so. Next slide, please. So now that we have this base case electrical network, we'll look at the ongoing co-digestion project at M1W. You can see in the blue box, kind of like the design basis, right? There is a calorie cycle grant to install new mixers in each of the 4 digesters, as well as a grit removal unit. Based on the anticipated organic slurry to be received, that should enable M1W to almost double the digester gas production. So that's a great resource. To fully implement that project, that triggers two items. One at the top is, depending on how you source this organic slurry, if you do want to pre-process it on site, you want a really clean slurry to put in the digester and avoid contaminants. Estimated capital cost of 43 million to have this pre-processing equipment, again, depending on how the organics are sourced, and that would be enclosed in the building with odor control. And then on the back end, that triggers also a number of improvements at the RTP in terms of digester heating, biogas handling, storage, and use, improved dewatering on the back end, and additional side stream treatment to comply with ammonia limit. Next slide, please. So for these requirements that I described, here is kind of like the capital estimate of about 30 million in addition to the other costs we saw in the previous section. So again, for the digester heating, biogas handling, gas storage, and side stream treatment mainly. Next slide, please. So I'll pause a little bit. So this is more on the region side. So with the co-digestion project, we're looking at you need a really clean slurry to put in your wet digester. And ideally, you would source that from commercial organics that were source separated, so separated at the source, so you clean organics. This section is looking at another potential stream of organics from the residential gray bin. So we all have to put our food waste in the green bin, but there's still some food waste left in the gray bin. So this section, this analysis was looking at what is the potential to extract food waste from our gray bin and options to process it with high solids technologies like composting, plug flow, anaerobic digestion, and dry batch anaerobic digestion. So I'll go quickly through that section. Next slide, please. So starting with the resource, right, you can see the blue pie chart is the waste currently landfilled at region. The blue, I guess too many blues, I'm not sure how to describe it. The turquoise blue, right, is the residential portion, the gray bin, about 90,000 tons per year. And the estimated composition, you know, still shows about 30% of food waste left in that gray bin. So there could be what we would call mixed waste processing implemented to kind of extract that food waste from the gray bin and derive some value like biogas again and compost. Next slide, please. So here is the overview of the various technologies. On the left, you have the wet anaerobic digestion, like the digesters at M1W, which again would look ideally at commercial source separated organics. And on the right, the three other options are what we would call high solids options to process that food waste from the gray bin. So we looked at plug flow anaerobic digestion in combination with composting, dry or batch anaerobic digestion, kind of like tunnels, if you will, and composting. So we looked at these three options. Next slide, please. So here are the cost estimate for these three options. You can see with anaerobic digestion, whether plug flow or dry AD, similar cost estimate at this stage and higher than composting only, but you would get biogas with the anaerobic digestion step. So, so yeah, that's kind of like a options for another source of waste, if you will. Next slide, please. Okay, so now let's look at the biogas. And that again includes both landfill gas and digester gas. Next slide, please. Here are the resources. So you can see on the chart the evolution over time. I think we're going through 2040. So we looked at kind of like a 15 years or horizon. In the dark blue at the bottom is the digester gas at M1W. You see the increase from almost doubling, you know, with the co-digestion project, as I mentioned before. And then in the lighter blue is the landfill gas production, which increases over time as more waste gets landfilled. And it does take into account the organic diversion mandate, but it will still receive some organics and it continues generating over years. So it's still increasing. So in total, you see the resource going from 2,600 standard cubic feet per minute to 3,800 in 2040. And I guess if we go to the next slide, that will give us more of a feel for what it means. So, you know, that would offset fossil natural gas use in 12,000, more than 12,000 homes, you know, or, you know, it could fuel almost like 1,500 CNG vehicles. So it's, you know, great resources that the agencies have. Next slide, please. So here's the approach we've taken on the biogas utilization study. First, we kind of did a high-level review of available technologies, you know, 13 of them going from direct uses to really advanced uses in hydrogen production, for example. And based on the maturity level, market potential at this time, we selected 3 technologies for further review in this base case study. First, combine heat and power, generating electricity and heat. Second, upgrading the biogas to renewable natural gas. So that is, you know, landfill gas is about 50% methane, digester gas is about 65% methane. And then, you know, renewable natural gas is almost 100% methane. So doing this upgrading step and being able to inject it in our gas pipeline, utilities pipeline. And then the third technology is renewable compressed natural gas for vehicle fueling. One more click, please. Yep. So then we look at the requirements from the base case electrical network that we established in, you know, the previous section. And we basically identified that after the base case electrical network needs are covered, we have about 1,000 SCFM, so standard cubic feet per minute, initially increasing to 1,900 SCFM in 2040 of biogas available for other uses. So third, if you do one more click, thank you. We identified 3 scenarios. One, electricity generation and selling that, to the PG&E or distributing it through the PG&E electrical grid. Second, producing RNG, renewable natural gas, and injecting it into the utilities pipeline. And third, doing both RNG injection and diverting some flow for on-site CNG fueling station. So these were the 3 scenarios, again, for the excess biogas. So you would use the biogas you need for your electrical network and achieving operational resiliency. And then with the excess gas, you can monetize it, if you will, in various ways. Next slide, please. So here is the financial analysis for the 3 scenarios. You can see clearly that scenario 2 and 3, so the gas upgrading and injecting in the pipeline, offer significantly more revenues. They have, higher capital investment and operating costs, but they definitely have the potential to generate more revenues. There are a lot of financial incentives and credits available for renewable natural gas currently. Next slide, please. In addition to these financial considerations, though, we did look at other criteria like reliability and complexity, footprint, modularity, greenhouse gas emission reductions. And you can see kind of like the color coding and the final score that recommended scenario 2, so upgrading the excess gas to renewable natural gas and injecting in the pipeline. So that's the scenario we've taken to further in the study. Next slide, please. So putting it, back on the original biogas resources chart, you can see at the bottom, if you will, like the digester gas could be used in the CHPs at Monterey 1 water for the electrical needs. Then a portion of the landfill gas would be used in regen gensets for their electrical needs and being able to export power to M1W. And finally, at the top, you would have the rest of the gas upgraded to RNG. With some modularity here with the gas production increasing, you could accommodate larger flows and generate more revenues, and thus avoid the current practice you see in red. There's some flaring right now, so kind of a lost opportunity. So that's the proposed biogas utilization. Next slide, please. So we'll jump into, the 4th component, if you will, which is biosolids management. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the approach there was, looking at the current conditions and the potential quantities of material that could be generated. Here we have anaerobic digesters and then dewatering in screw presses. They're near their end of useful life and produce a cake which is, low total solids content comparatively, which requires like large drying beds. So there's an opportunity there to improve the dewatering and save some space and offer more end-use options for management option for the biosolids. The dried biosolids are currently landfilled at Regen, and that's a practice that would most likely, change in the future. You can see, may not read through the numbers, but we kind of looked at the quantities of solids currently generated versus with the co-digestion project, right? You will have more solids generated. And then depending on the various technologies, if you add drying, pyrolysis, you can generate certain quantities of pellets or biochar. So that was the initial step. Second, we looked at the potential markets for end-use products and the technologies available. And I guess we'll have another slide, but the punchline is that, there are potential sales value or revenue potential with compost, pellets, and biochar, and some opportunities in your area. Third, there, I think you're aware, more awareness around emerging contaminants and PFAS, and I know, M1W is keen in addressing these, and following closely the regulation. So right now, the most promising options are advanced thermal technologies to address PFAS. There is also, a willingness to move away from disposal. So based on these criteria, if we go to the next slide, please. You see kind of the green column, like the technologies that would address PFAS, have some market value and move away from landfilling. You're moving to the right of the table and advanced thermal treatment. To implement these technologies, you want a fairly dry product. And that's why we proposed a phased implementation, really focusing first on improving dewatering, and then considering a drying step. And in parallel, you can monitor the regulations and technology development. So that's been the approach on the biosolids management. So next slide, please. You can see here this phased approach. In the near term, there may be consideration for third-party option if you want to move away from landfilling right away, because it will take, a little bit, couple years to improve, to make any improvements. Then again, dewatering improvement, potential new centrifuges or other technologies, and then a potential drying step, and in the future, potentially advanced thermal treatment. So that's, for example, high temperature pyrolysis. Next slide, please. These are the cost estimate, capital cost and operating cost and potential revenues for these various phases. So first, dewatering improvement only, where then you have operating costs and hauling costs. Second phase, if you add drying, then you can have, you can sell the pellets, which offsets a little bit your operational cost. And then the third phase, if you do implement pyrolysis, you can sell biochar, and offset more of the operating costs. Next slide, please. So finally, putting it all together, if you move to the next slide again, please. This is just summarizing all the cost estimates we've shown through the presentation. In green are the line items most likely associated with Monterey One Water. So again, at the top, it was for the base case electrical network, the, potentially new CHPs at some point, extending the interconnection to the RTP and SVRP, and then potentially batteries and more solar. Then it was the required improvements for the co-digestion, pre-processing of the organics, optional depending on how you procure them. But then definitely some plant improvements at the RTP to accommodate the organics. And then, the gas upgrading will be a major source of revenues. If you recall these numbers, that's kind of like the largest opportunity for the agencies. And finally, the biosolids management that we just saw is this kind of like proposed phased approach. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps, these are some questions, and I think we can jump to the next slide. Actually, I'll use the graphics instead. So these were kind of like the 4 components we saw. So first, the electrical utility reliability and this proposed base case network. So this is really the next step, completing, the interconnection, the intertie between the facilities and potentially new generation at some point. Then second, I guess, top right, the biogas utilization, that's your major source of revenue. We propose upgrading to RNG again, but there's a number of options available. Third, the co-digestion. You need to source the organics and finalize the improvements at the plant. And fourth, the biosolids management was this phased approach of improving dewatering and considering advanced thermal treatment in the future. So that sums it up in one slide here. With that, I'll kick it back to Matt.
Yes, next slide, please, Chai. Actually, I'd like to, Rachel, are you available to speak to the grant opportunity that we recently applied for, please?
Happy to. All right. Good evening. So at the end of March, Monterey One Water submitted an application to the US EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. This program allocates a one-time opportunity of $4.6 billion in competitive grants to implement projects that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and other harmful air pollutants. So Monterey One Water submitted an application where we requested $49.9 million for enhanced gas conditioning. As you probably know, and as was shared tonight, Monterey One Water is currently upgrading its digesters, so we can co-digest both wastewater solids and organic waste from entities like Regen. This will significantly increase our biogas production and presents an opportunity for new productive use. So from biogas, renewable natural gas can be produced through the process of conditioning. So I might sound like a broken record on this, but this was an unprecedented funding opportunity from the federal government. So while information on our renewable energy study was only presented tonight, and we're really in the early stages of defining our path forward, staff felt it was an opportunity we just couldn't pass up. There is no match. And within the funding tier we submitted, up to 30 awards will be distributed. That being said, I'd like to tailor expectations. As technically this funding opportunity was only available to states in large metropolitan areas, we found a workaround, but that means the competition is fierce and other applicants are going to have a much larger community base than even our regional utility. But, ultimately, we balance the resources needed to produce that application with the potential community benefit.
If I can
Yeah,
chime in for a second
absolutely.
here. So you just heard Rachel say a one time. This isn't one of those things where they're going to keep offering it over and over. So we felt it was consistent with past board direction is to look for grant funding where available and where we match up reasonably well with the criteria. I'll also point out, going back to the Pure Water days, when we first went after Bureau of Rec funding, very much to what Rachel just mentioned, there's a payback period, right? So every entity that puts out grants, they want to see what that benefit is. With a small population base, oftentimes we don't compete that well. The first time we went for Bureau funding, we didn't get it. We did our debriefs both in Denver as well as Washington, D.C., and offered up some change in language for future grants. That language sort of tried to level the playing field a little bit for us smaller communities versus the LAs and Chicagos and New Yorks. That allowed us to get funding in the next rounds. So through Bureau of Rec, we got about 30 million bucks. Even though this is a one-time deal, I mean, I'm hopeful that we get something, but if we don't, it does open up that opportunity to have that dialogue when we do our debrief. So if and when any future money comes down, obviously not in this program, but certainly maybe through EPA or DOE or something like that, we have that dialogue to hopefully level the playing field for smaller entities like ourselves. So just wanted to point out the parallels to what we did with the Bureau of Reclamation and Pure Water.
All right. I'd just like to wrap this up by saying that now that this study is complete, you're probably wondering what the next steps are. Really, the next steps are to begin implementing some of the projects recommended in this study. At last month's board meeting, I highlighted 4 major new projects that were born out of this renewable energy study that I've recommended be added to our capital improvement program for the next 10 years. And I anticipate we will soon consider how to go about funding and financing these projects as part of the upcoming budgeting process. We are also now seeking new grant opportunities that may be a good fit for some of the recommended projects. For example, we recently learned of a California Energy Commission grant that may be a very good fit for one of the recommended projects, which is to interconnect the electrical systems of the advanced water purification facility, the regional treatment plant, and the Salinas Valley reclamation project. That would enable us to purchase even more power from Regen. So these are some of the next steps, but having this plan in place really gives us clarity and helps us remain poised to benefit from future grant opportunities. So thank you for your time. At this point, we would be glad to entertain any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Directors, questions? There must be some.
So how does this project line up? You mentioned a little bit. Can you go into more detail about how it aligns with our CIP budget? And what is our CIP budget altogether?
Well, so at the last board meeting, we presented 4 major projects totaling about $90 million over the next 10 years. This was in addition to many of the ongoing projects that we needed just to keep some of these older facilities renewed and running properly.
So our 10-year CIP is about $237 million over the next 10 years. So Anthony, it bounces a little bit, but in general, we're looking at, 24 million bucks a year in assets that we need to invest in on the capital side of the farm. I think there was a couple years in there you had 40, 45, and then others that were a little lower, but on average, just for the board members to think about it in that context.
Yeah. What we're proposing to do is to pace out these projects so they're not all happening simultaneously in any one particular fiscal year. For example, next year, we want to get started on the digester gas handling and digester heating improvements. We'd start that in year 1 and construct it in years 2 and 3. And then in year 2, we would get going on the design of the next project, which is solids dewatering and drying, and that would be built in years 2 through 5, for example, and then later move towards advanced processing of the biosolids. That's the thermal treatment of the biosolids. I envision that happening like in years 7 through 10. And the idea would be to pace the expenditures over a number of years.
Yeah, and then this is touches on this, but really would apply to almost anything we do CIP related. But do we have regular communication with our federal representatives about pursuing money? I said we just got $1 million from Zoe Lofgren for our wastewater efforts in Salinas. So do we have those conversations with our representatives?
Yes, we do. So, but that's a great question because a lot of this, you saw the big numbers and we need to do our best to try to get grant funding. So both at the state level and the federal level, Mike McCullough does the state advocacy. We do have a lobbying firm that is in Sacramento and is on top of things. Rachel heads our federal advocacy and has a lobbyist in DC, Carpy and Clay, that helps us with all this. In addition, they have regular phone calls and team meetings with our congressmen and senators' staffs. So there's a regular process that we're trying to go through. In addition, I guess this is timely, Rachel and I will be heading back to Washington, D.C. next week for a series of meetings over 3 days. A lot of it having to do with this project or this concept and where we could potentially look for areas of funding or regulatory assistance or whatever it may be. So we have a fairly developed advocacy program that, we can certainly line out for you in greater levels of detail at a future board meeting.
Thank you. That's great. And enjoy your flight. So.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Williamson.
That's me. I wasn't ready for it. So the renewable natural gas, is that to be used for vehicles? What is the intent? Is it commercial, private?
So Kim had two things: renewable natural gas and then compressed natural gas. The renewable natural gas, the conditioning unit that we're talking about, is to sell the gas back to PG&E. So there's a relatively large pipeline. REGN&US could sell that gas back.
Perfect.
If the option that you saw on the little table to the right had RNG and CNG, CNG could be produced as well, which would go to vehicle fueling.
Okay.
If I may add, so when you inject in PG&E network, you actually have various options for the monetization itself, right? So PG&E is kind of like transporting your gas.
Yeah.
Then you have various ways. So you can sell it to PG&E, and they have a biomethane, so another term for renewable natural gas procurement program. It's open right now. They are mandated to procure renewable natural gas. The program goes through 2040 right now, so that's kind of like the horizon we selected. And they are supported. We already went through the initial screening study, if you will, to check that the pipeline has the capacity. And then it would be a procurement process to sell the gas to PG&E. Another option is to find a CNG fueling station somewhere in California, connected to PG&E network, and virtually sell the molecules to them, if you will. If you do sell to a fueling stations, then you can benefit from the EPA, so the federal level environmental credits like called RINs, Renewable Identification Numbers, and the California Low Carbon Fuel Standard credits. So these credits attributes would give, are one of the main reason was for the high potential revenues. They're more uncertain, right? It's kind of like a market. So you have like different ways. And in general, you would use a portfolio, right? So the most reasonable approach would be some of it would be procured to PG&E or another gas utilities, by the way, like SoCalGas also has a, procurement mandate. Then some of it could be sold to fueling stations, and that would allow you to have a diverse portfolio and maximize revenue and minimize risk.
Okay, thank you for that. Those were both good. Did you have something on this one? Oh, okay. Just a few more. I won't take too long. I'll try not to. Security. There was this slide that you were showing where how flaring occurs now, and then there was kind of like a vertical dotted line. Was that line representing when we anticipate the flaring to cease, and we use that to transition?
Yeah, basically it was the year we selected for the study as implementation for the utilization project, right?
Okay.
So current practice, and then assuming, and I forgot exactly what year it was, but you're starting to put the gas upgrading in place, and so you can send that gas to the upgrader, if you will, instead of flaring. So that was kind of.
And what year was that?
2026.
2026.
Yeah.
2026. Okay. Thank you. I have some comments too, but I don't know if you want comments now or we do that after public comment.
Well, we're going to take more questions from directors if they have
them. Director Church has his hand up, and I also wanted to point out that Gary Darling, who's been part of the project, is also online if anyone had questions for him as well.
All right. We'll go to Mr. Coletti, Director Coletti.
Thank you, Chair. I'm kind of interested in the electricity production component of this. So as I understand it, we won't be producing electricity on site per se. We'll be exporting the gas to an electric producer, PG&E, and then presumably buying it back at a cheaper rate. Is that the idea?
No, you will produce electricity on site to ensure your operations. So that's kind of like what we call the base case electrical network requirements. So we are allocating a portion of the gas to generate electricity on site. It could be both, at REGN current
for
power
both
generation
entities
facility and your current. And then it was only the excess gas
That gets
that would be upgraded
export.
to RNG and put in the pipeline.
How many megawatts does the on-site usage require
Yeah, I
per
think-
year?
Can I address that?
Yeah.
So, remember, there's 3 plants at this, at our facility.
Well, however you want to break it out.
Combined
Yeah.
presently, you're looking at about, in the 2,500 to 3,000 kilowatts.
Does that include Regen's demands also? That's just us.
That's just our plant, Monterey
And-
One Water.
Regen was about a half a megawatt. So we're looking at about 4 megawatts total between us.
You mean megawatts per hour?
No.
That's the generating capacity. So if it ran for an hour.
Yeah.
It'd have 4 megawatts an hour.
Right.
Yeah.
So normally it's either total power or it's energy
Yeah.
in megawatt or, whatever units you want to use. But so 3,000 kilowatts per hour is the consumption for the plant. Is that right?
That 3,000 kilowatts is like instantaneous demand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Instantaneous power.
We would need a power generation system capable of supplying that.
3,000.
We need 3 megawatts for us.
Yes. And
1 megawatt for them. So combined, we're looking at a 4 megawatt
yes.
capacity for both.
And Regen's existing power generation station has capacity up to about 5 megawatts, 5,000 kilowatts.
Yeah.
So their existing power generation station, it literally be capable of supplying most of our entire facility's total power demand. But it's an aging facility, and a lot like our old cogeneration system, we're going to have to look towards a future where we replace the aging equipment and upsize it
And
to accommodate our growing power demands.
well, and we produce what, about 1 3/4
Yes.
megawatts?
Yes.
So demands,
Mhm.
4 megawatts, production 5 over at Regen,
Mhm.
about 1 3/4 plus or minus at our facility. So we produce actually a fair amount.
How much do we spend per year just on our PG&E bill that would presumably be cut, and at what savings based on all the money that you have to invest to actually generate the infrastructure?
I don't know what our annual bill is.
Tammy, maybe you can help me here.
A lot.
Yeah, that's.
So it,
Yeah.
but when you add up all of our
I'm just trying to get
meters,
the
it's a lot.
cost benefit.
Totally get it.
Yeah.
So that's from what we're looking at in the study, and we can dive into the study and some of the economic analysis further. When we look at the demand charges, that's when it starts getting a little wacky, because we have to pay for power, but we also have to pay just in case we ever have that demand. So when you look at it across the board, those costs are tremendously high. What we're trying to balance out is, and I'm just going to combine us for now. We have like almost 7 megawatts of production, which we could do if we connected to each other and we were 100% reliable. But we still sort of want PG&E there to help out. As Kim pointed out, we're increasing the amount of biogas. We can still generate power and we can still feed it to ourselves. But then we're going to have this excess energy or biogas that we hope to condition and sell.
Yeah.
It's truly the economics that are going to make this work or not work. So hence the reason going after these grants that, frankly, probably a low % chance we get it, but that's what will make this happen without encumbering all of our customers and Regen's customers with the capital costs.
So it's the biogas production that you can actually retail
Yeah.
or wholesale
Yeah.
that's going to actually make this pencil out.
That was the exciting part on this one.
All right.
And
But when you burn the methane for energy production locally, you are producing CO2, obviously.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
I need to emphasize that the economics of the renewable natural gas are much better than if we were to, for example, replace our cogeneration engine generator system with a multi-million-dollar power generation station, because PG&E only pays probably less than 5 cents per kilowatt hour for any
sure.
excess power that we would sell to them. Whereas the renewable natural gas, because of the many credits that Kim highlighted, it's much more, for lack of a better term, lucrative.
Right. And it's the economy of scale driving the cost benefit that I was trying to understand. And I'm getting there. Thank you,
Hey,
Chair. Go ahead.
Luke, if you don't mind me Wow, these are a lot bigger numbers than I thought. So Rachel and Fred just gave me some information on our PG&E bills. So with the treatment plant, about 1.4 million bucks per year. Natural gas is another 300,000. So we got 1.7 over there. And I'll get you these two, Luke, if you want.
That's for the board, but yeah.
When we look at our pump stations, 6.5 million bucks. So in total for the 23-24 budget year, our utilities are $8.7 million. It makes the admin office here seem pretty small at $17,000 a year. And last time I checked, I don't think we get a Christmas card from PG&E.
We
Oh, well, when you spend 6 million bucks, you should. Or I'm sorry, 8 million. Does that put it in perspective and just
It does,
ballpark?
and that's with you producing energy already.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
And sorry.
Yeah.
Because you just prompted when pure water expansion comes online.
Right. Exactly.
That's just, I mean, that's within the estimates that Matt gave, but from a dollar perspective, everything's increasing.
How many more megawatts will the pure water expansion add?
We're at 1,800 kilowatts peak
2.4.
demand. It's going up to about, I think about 25 to 2,600 kilowatts. So it's a fairly significant additional power demand with the expansion
Another 2.5
of the
megawatts. Okay.
AWPF. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Paul, if I can add just one thing on that real quick too, the budget doesn't even reflect, most people realize that our PG&E rates went up about 20% in January, another 10%. And so, I mean, obviously we did the best guess when we did the budget, but it doesn't reflect that. So it's going to even be higher when we do next year's budget as well too.
And Director Coletti, one more thing I would like to add is that Regen is currently selling their power to PG&E for, I believe, less than 5 cents per kilowatt hour. We are currently paying PG&E for our power more than 20 cents per kilowatt hour. So that really illustrates, it just really makes sense to finish out building this power intertie between our two agencies. And that's why that's the project that's actually already in construction.
Okay.
Because there's an opportunity there for Regen to sell us power for more than they get from PG&E. There's an opportunity for us to purchase power from Regen for significantly less than what we currently pay PG&E.
And we'd be buying it at 5 cents. Get that on the record, please.
That hasn't been determined.
Not sure I like the expression on the GM's face from Regen. But all right, we'll go to Director Church and then Director Habino.
Thank you. I was looking here at the biosolids chart here and with the options and technology. So I understand compost is used for, understand biochar, which also could be used for concrete. On the pellets for the biosolids and non-uniform particle ones, and it's referenced in here that the what's the exact wording here, that well, for the first one is that high value markets are not well established, and then the other one doesn't really talk about a market. But I'm trying to understand what it's. I'm assuming those are both agricultural use, and why? Do you have any idea why they don't have much of a market?
Yeah, so I think I can address this one. The granules, let's say 50% total solids granules, that's still essentially biosolids that is more dry than your typical biosolids. It still contains many of the pollutants that regular biosolids contain. The idea would be in the near term that could be mixed with other organic waste streams and compost and become soil amendment. But there are counties like Monterey where the land application of biosolids is effectively prohibited. So that material would have to essentially be exported out of the county. A lot of that material is going to the Central Valley.
Okay. Right.
Now, the big benefit of the biochar is that assuming you're using a high temperature process like pyrolysis, you will break down the fluorinated chemicals such as PFAS, and that material will essentially be inert. It's like carbon. And by putting that material into concrete, you're effectively sequestering that carbon into the concrete. It's also a very valuable soil amendment, and it can also be marketed for corporate uses such as pigmentation, environmental remediation, et cetera. Biochar is a marketable commodity.
So, I looked at how much it would be, how much raw material or feedstock would be, used like in the composting, this biochar. But I'm not sure if I saw in here what the end result of how much product there was, because I know there's a loss.
Yes. Yes, there's typically a 10-fold reduction in the volume and weight of the material. So, you typically put 10,000 tons of feedstock into a process like this. You're only going to get about 1,000 tons of biochar. But that biochar is currently selling. I need to emphasize selling. We wouldn't be paying to have it disposed, but we would be able to market it at typically north of $200 per ton. And the biochar that's being produced at Silicon Valley Clean Water in Redwood City, they're getting $400 per ton for the biochar. So it's a valuable material.
Is there any, and my last question was, because biochar is relatively new on the market, and as the report states, there's only one facility running it commercially in the US. So I know this is a little bit like fortune telling, but with increasing use of biochar and more coming on the market, are we likely to see a pretty sharp reduction in price? And do we have any guesstimate how that's might happen at some point?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to forecast, but if right now the hot market for biochar is as a substitute for some of the sand and aggregate and concrete to produce what they call carbon neutral or carbon negative concrete. And there are a lot of entities, especially corporate entities, who have a desire to reduce their carbon footprint and get credit for the sequestering of carbon. And if you could think about how much concrete is made in just California alone, I think that you're likely going to have very high demand for biochar for the near and long term, regardless of how much is produced by municipalities like ours.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Director Hibino.
Okay. I have a question concerning Kim. The RNG, you said in terms of PG&E, is there going to be, you said for 40 years, you said 2040, the price would be that or above what it's currently?
So it's a procurement process. So you would, submit an application to sell your gas at a given price, and then you would have a guaranteed sell price for that through 2040. So you could have like a 15-year contract with PG&E to sell your gas. So it might be, a bit lower than what you would get, on the market with the RINs and the LCFS credits, but it would be a guaranteed price. So that's why in general, we may use a portfolio approach.
Okay, so it'd be a contract. And then with the CNG, you said something about there would be credits. Would that be credits for the companies using the CNG or the companies buying the CNG?
So you could do it yourself. You'll probably use a third party to monetize your gas, and they would, sell it. It generates credit. You retire the credits. You will get that benefits through that third party, and that's the CNG. So if you put it in the pipeline and you have another off taker, right? Scenario 3 that we had was also the option of selling directly to an on-site CNG fueling station, and not going through the PG&E network and marketing directly there.
Gotcha. Thank you. And then one more from Matt. Matt, has there ever anyone looked at in terms of demand charges? Because I know demand charges are crazy for businesses, and I've experienced it myself of having battery storage to take on the demand just when you start up that machinery.
Yes, I'm a big fan of, well, first I'll say battery storage is generally very expensive. The capital cost is very high. And so you have to limit the application of the battery storage. But yes, there are certain applications within our plant where if we have a bump in PG&E power, sort of instantaneous loss of power, where the plant could ride right through something like that, almost like a uninterruptible power supply with your computer. Certain processes could really benefit from some battery storage, but generally it's not going to be cost effective to try and build essentially a battery plant to cover the entire power demand of all of our facilities. You'd want to limit the application of it, in my opinion. And if I may add something regarding renewable natural gas, I think I saw where you were going there, is that we need to talk about that in the context of Senate Bill 1383. A lot of cities in California, a component of that is that they have to procure organic waste products. So a lot of cities are trying to figure out how to satisfy that particular requirement of Senate Bill 1383. So they're figuring out, oh, we got to haul in a certain amount of compost and find a home for this, or how are we going to comply with this? The benefit of producing renewable natural gas from material that is diverted from a landfill is that if you have a waste hauler in your city that has natural gas fueled trash fleets, the trucks that they use to pick up the trash and the green waste, the recyclables, if they substitute renewable natural gas for the petroleum-based natural gas that they're currently using, there's an opportunity there to satisfy that city's entire SB 1383 organic waste procurement target. So that's a sort of a difficult to quantify benefit. And so we anticipate that some of the waste haulers here would really want to get their hands on some of that wheeled renewable natural gas in the PG&E pipeline.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, sir. Just a couple of quick questions. One of the concerns I have looking at this report, I think it's fantastic. You know, we're looking at a lot of this stuff and how to renew it. But I'm a little concerned with the sequencing of how we're going to do it. Seems like we're already starting to gas up the digesters to start making a bunch more methane that we can't burn. So we either need to clean it and get it in the pipeline, or we need to upgrade the CHP units at the plant to start burning it. And it doesn't seem to be lined up in what I would think would be a logical way to do it. If we're going to make more gas, we got to have something to use it, or a pipeline over to a CNG facility at Green Waste Recovery. That's my concern. And I would like to see, as we progress, getting a little more logic, maybe at least in my head. And sometimes my gray matter doesn't work good, but to where we're not making a bunch of gas that we're going to have to flare, versus having gas that we can use, even if we're running our CHP units at less than optimal efficiency. That's all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Redfield Cronin. Anyone else? So I have a couple. First off, so just to kind of summarize the decision-making for both boards is going to be looking at real costs to build the infrastructure to do any of these projects, looking at projected revenues that some of them might produce. And of course, there's uncertainties in projecting those revenues, deciding where to use the energy products, and it's two forms, electricity and some form of natural gas, where to use those. And then there's what's the list of intangible benefits? Greenhouse gas reductions, of course, is one. Regulatory compliance is another. But are there a third and fourth intangibles that we need to somehow mash into our heads in this calculus?
So I'm going to say yes. And It goes back to, I mean, we did a nexus study with the Pure Water Monterey project that looked at those intangibles, those ones you can't bring down to a dollar amount, such as job creation. If we're bringing in, as we have right now, $4.2 million worth of grant funding, there's job creation in this community. Certainly, like you mentioned, just the environmental effects, and so on and so on. We have not looked at those in a significant fashion to put on a tech memo together, but they are absolutely there.
So, and certainly there are some quasi intangible costs potentially if we're using biological processes to produce methane, but they also produce other stuff, right? And then in order to make better use of it, we've got to clean it. But anytime you clean something, it means you're now creating a side waste stream of something. I don't know anything about the chemistry of these processes, but I'd certainly like to be enlightened at some point. What side waste streams of potentially difficult to get non-saleable things might we also be creating by some of these processes, just to try and weigh that. And then you said that when we generate electricity, sell it to PG&E, we're getting about 25% of what customers pay for that same kilowatt hour. Is that also true when you sell natural gas to PG&E?
Kim, do you have the natural gas costs or revenue examples?
In terms of just the natural gas commodity pricing, you're around like $4 per, I'll use another unit, like million BTU. With the RIN credits, etc., you can get up to $20-30 per MMBTU. So you'll definitely get like much higher value from these environmental credits.
But what do we pay for natural gas?
The commodity price is around, yeah, I don't
Four.
know your utility bills, but
So it's in the ballpark of four, is what you're saying.
but it's around
But
4
you
for
get
commodity pricing.
it enhances because you have the environmental benefits that you're required. Well, some places are required to have, right? And there's a value to those.
So yeah, and the fossil, so natural gas is fossil based, right? So $4 per
renewable.
MMBTU. When you get into like renewable natural gas, and then the pricing vary based on the carbon intensity of the renewable natural gas. So how it's created, whether it comes from agricultural, dairy manure, or landfill gas. So there's different pricing, but
Okay, so currently we are generating between the two organizations some electricity, which we use internally, correct?
Yes.
Which is
and sell back also.
and we produce more than we use internally currently and sell back. We might be able to fix that to a certain extent. But we're generating that electricity using biogas, correct? And you're telling me that cleaned up biogas sold to PG&E might be even more valuable. So at some point, we may not want to be generating internal. This sounds like we need a financial wizard here to try and figure out before we build more, say, biogas engines to generate electricity. We'll want to know which way we need to be going. I should think.
No, absolutely. Now, one of the benefits of the engines is heat, which our plant needs the heat. So that's another variable. But you're absolutely right. What we've decided is we both have these investments in infrastructure. We're going to keep using them. Any excess, let's condition and sell. At some point, as we start looking at the market forces or our need for heat in the digesters, there may be a point where we're like, hey, let's just buy the electricity and sell gas because we can get it at a much, the business case is there.
Right, right.
So absolutely.
But we might want to have a good handle on that before we make a larger investment in internal generation of electricity from biogas.
Yes, and I need to highlight, noticeably absent from the proposed capital improvement program is one of the recommended projects, which is replacement of the cogeneration engine generators. Our intent is to run those things as long as we can. And then later, and maybe in the 10 to 15 year time horizon, do that exactly the analysis you're talking about.
Yeah.
It may prove most economical just to put all of the gas out into the PG&E pipeline.
Or
That may be the case.
beyond the economics, I mean, maybe we want to have a joint power plant because we're going to be a hell of a lot more reliable than PG&E is. You know how frequently our plant gets bumped off, and that is untenable for a solid waste facility and a wastewater facility. So yeah, it may not make economic sense, but it makes a lot of sense for our core business, both our core businesses.
Well, and no offense to Regen Monterey, but given a choice, I'd rather have trash pile up than the stuff we handle.
And I did also want to point out, I believe Guy Petroborg with Region has a couple comments as well.
Please come up.
Good evening, Chair Moore and Board of Directors. I was hoping to maybe elevate your understanding about two aspects. One was around the demand charges or standby charges from PG&E. That's a cost associated with the delivery of power should you need it in the future. So it's PG&E being available to provide power to the operations. That's not going to go away, I don't think, in the projects being discussed with you today. What the effect of the feasibility study, should we implement it, the two agencies, and produce more power, that'll just put our internal power as primary electricity, which is where PG&E is presently. They are the primary supplier. They would be replaced as being the primary supplier if the agencies generate their own power. The agencies still would have a desire for operational reliability to have PG&E as the secondary power as opposed to standby generators. So it would be preferable to have the utility grid as your secondary power source. And should that not be available, then the backup power available in standby generators could be used. So that was one topic. And then the other topic was around some of the questions on RNG. Basically, that's a sale of a gas into the pipeline. That pipeline, PG&E is the distributor. They can also be the buyer. There can be other buyers too. So the potential contracts could be with PG&E and could be with private entities or both. So that one to give you the perspective of the off-taker environment there. And as an example, the community truck yard facility that Green Waste Recovery leases from Regen next door and serves 7 of our 9 member agencies. They purchase RNG over that pipeline. PG&E's the deliverer of that gas, but the producer is another party elsewhere. And that's what we're talking about potentially doing as agencies, is to become a producer. Hoping that would help.
And the molecules of gas that those trucks get aren't actually the molecules made by the producer.
That's correct.
Just it's all this gas is gas.
Gas is gas.
Okay. So over time, as solar photovoltaic has taken hold throughout California, PG&E has gone to the CPUC and gradually found a way to convince them to ratchet down the deals for power sellers into their system for electricity, as I understand it. Has the same thing been happening with people who sell natural gas into the system?
you would be in
As
the
I
best
said,
position?
Not yet. There's still, good market potential for RNG for the next 15, 20 years. At some point, we are going towards electrification. If you look at transportation, we've been talking about CNG fueling station. The next step is really zero emission vehicles, and that would be more battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles. So at some point, you will see CNG vehicles phased out, but there's still a long, runway for that. So for the next 15, 20 years, there is still a good market potential for RNG. And as I said, the PG&E and SoCalGas, like the electric, the gas IOUs, independent operator, investor-owned utilities in California do have a biomethane procurement mandate right now. And it goes through 2040 right now. It may be extended, but they do have to procure biomethane or renewable natural gas. And PG&E has also their internal sustainable commitment, which is even higher in terms of procuring biomethane. I think it represents, I want to say, up to 10% of the core demand natural gas.
So your thought is for the next 16 years or so, we're kind of sort of safe.
Yeah.
And then legislation, regulation, whatever, 16 years from now or starting 12 years from now, we have to watch carefully if we get into this.
Yeah.
I think it may be instructive to talk about the future of hydrogen too, because there are different forms of hydrogen, and Kim can enlighten us on this, but most hydrogen produced now is derived from natural gas that's fossil fuel derived. And so there's a push towards green hydrogen, and green hydrogen is produced from renewable natural gas. So even beyond 2040, if the economics of selling renewable natural gas to PG&E drop out, there may be a potential future with hydrogen production. So you have to, but you got to start
True.
with RNG. So
Although I do remember back as a teenager a few years ago reading all those Scientific American Scientific American articles about how hydrogen is the fuel of the future. So
it's coming this time.
it's coming. All right. Any other questions from directors? All right. Any questions from the public? All right. Seeing none, thank you very much for an excellent report. Yes.
I just have
Vice Chair Williamson.
a few closeout thoughts. So the city of Monterey participates in an organization called Association of Defense Communities, because we have a couple military installations here. And one of the things that they've been hyper focused on as of recently, and this is DoD in general, are creating microgrids for their military installations. And so I think this ties really well towards the efforts of that, because if we think about our adversaries and how they will attack in the future, they're going to be attacking agencies like ours and trying to shut down communities so that we literally can't function. And so waste treatment, water, waste in general, I think these are all things that can really impact society. I think people don't think about how the impacts if these systems don't function. So I say all this to say that it's not just the military installations themselves, because if we think about our military personnel and where they reside, they tend to live in communities. The fair majority of people don't live on a military installation themselves. And how do we make sure that our military members are battle ready to show up to work and protect the country when something is to go wrong? And so it has a lot to do with the infrastructure in the community and making sure it's taken care of. So there's a lot of effort and funding available. So I bring this up in regards to the conversation around grants. So the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation, there's two grants in particular that came up during the latest conference that we had earlier this month. One is called the Military Installation Resilience Review, the MER grant. And then there's another one called the Defense Community Infrastructure Program. And that second one in particular, the DSIP, is relatively new and it's not used by a lot of communities, and it will only become more competitive moving forward. So in as much as we can tap into that sooner rather than later, these types of projects, I think, fit really well into what they're aiming for. So I just bring that forward to this space. And I think just kind of as a closing remark, I think this is just really exciting to see. I appreciate the cooperation between the agencies and all the work that's being done behind the scenes. I would just encourage us to continue to think bold and big and take those risks and invest heavily now, because it's not just a problem of the future. I mean, we're seeing impacts of climate change now, today, whether it's the floods that we've experienced over the last few years here in California, whether it's sea level rise that's going to be starting to impact us more, the fires, there's the health disparities with communities that are adjacent to industries that cause climate producing gases. So I just share all this to say that I push us, I encourage us to continue pushing that. And I know it's balanced with the need for us to maintain a functioning agency and organization now. But the alternative is that we are impacted by one of these natural disasters in a serious way, and we're still going to be investing in taking care of a recovery out of that. So I just encourage us to think bold and just appreciate all the work that's being done by the entire team. So thanks, everybody.
Indeed. Thank you very much. And if there are no other questions or comments, we'll go to agenda item 10, staff reports. Mr. Scioto.
Thank you, Chair Moore. So just a couple quick things. On April 1st and 2nd, Mike McCullough and I had the opportunity to go to Sacramento and meet with a number of our legislators, as well as many members of the State Water Resources Control Board. Actually, 3 of the 5 board members, as well as staff, and dropped in at a Bioenergy Association of California meeting that was that evening. I think we talked about the EPA grant, which staff has put together. When do we hear about that, Rachel? June? The EPA grant? July. Okay. So if everyone could just keep their fingers crossed, that'd be really helpful. Okay. So keep those fingers crossed for a while more.
Bless you.
Coming out of the Bioenergy Association meeting in Sacramento, we conveyed to their executive director what we're trying to accomplish here. She was familiar, but not as conversant as she would like to be. Gary Darling, who is online, has been talking with her as well. Her name is Julia Levens. She came down on April 17th and spent some time with us, which was great. Not just Mike and Rachel and myself, but also Matt showed around, and Jose at the plant did a good overview of everything. So she was pleased to see the collaboration going on with Regen and how unique it is in the state. On April 22nd, so was that last week, I guess? Last Monday, we had a new controller start, and I'll let Fred talk about her in just a little bit, but I wanted to highlight we filled one of those key positions that we've been talking about for a long time. And then I wanted to remind everyone that we get to spend tomorrow night together as well in strategic planning from 5 to 9. And Jim, did you want to talk quick about the a closed session item?
Sure. We've issued an agenda for a special meeting tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. A need arose today to meet with you all in closed session over potential anticipated litigation. And so Chai will be posting that agenda very soon.
In the next 19 minutes?
In the next 19 minutes.
Oh, it's posted.
It's posted. So we'll be meeting tomorrow night at 8 as part of that workshop meeting.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I wanted to thank Kim and all of her team, as well as Gary Darling and Derek. This has been a long going as far as the feasibility study. When I first got here, we were talking with, Philip and Felipe have left, but that was one of the first conversations, is getting together and working on this feasibility study. Jennifer in engineering, 4 years ago, we knew SB 1383 was coming down the pike, and we did an extensive study on how we're going to handle our biosolids management. Basically, at the end of that study, Paul had recommended that we deal with PFAS. And so there's really only pyrolysis, et cetera. But that was kind of shelved until this feasibility study. So we're running up against those of you that know that January 1st, 2025, the region can only accept 25% of what the volume of biosolids were from 2014. So even though we've got a plan in place to go ahead and ship our biosolids off-site, which is going to be very costly until Matt and his team can get these the biosolids improvement and upgrades done. But we have submitted a letter to Felipe and his board to take a look at, can we, as Monterey One Water, still send over the 25% from 2014, which meets the letter of the law, basically. So we're waiting anxiously to hear back from them, because if we upgrade our drying operations, then we will have more capability of sending more volume. So anyway, this is all exciting, but I wanted to thank Kim for the presentation and working with them for the last 2 years on this. The other thing is, those of you, I think I mentioned it in a committee meeting, that we were on 100% at the RTP on portable generator power for a week, from Monday to Saturday. And the last time we did anything like that was 2006. So I'm real proud of our utilities and maintenance team for making that happen. We had rented 10 generators, one as a backup, anywhere from 200 to 1,000 kilowatt power. So that was an exciting, as we did a cogen side A retrofit on that. So we've increased the reliability. So thanks to Daryl and his team working closely with operations. And then one last thing, we've gotten our SRDF facility ready. We should be taking river water by now, but the river's going too fast. And we have to wait until WRA basically says we're good to go. We don't want to do any damage to the infrastructure, but we're ready to go. And hopefully we'll be taking river water in the next couple weeks, since growing season and the demand has increased. That's all I have.
Yeah, just a few things for the board. So like Paul mentioned, we had our new controller start. We're really excited to have our board. We're really excited too in finance. We're fully staffed after over a year and a half of basically different vacancies. So we're really excited. Just a tiny little background on her. She previously worked as the finance director for the Gateway Center of Monterey. She actually lives in the Monterey area, and she's just really excited about working for us here. Kind of a new experience for her. The budget will be coming back to BPC with the first draft of the budget basically in early May. And as part of it as well too, Matt mentioned this earlier, we're going to be looking at financing capital projects somewhat with bonds. So we'll be presenting kind of a draft bond resolution for consideration by PPC in May as well too. And then the tax roll, we've been working hard with our member entities. In fact, I've sent out to Monterey today basically drafts of kind of like an agenda report, resolution, and collection agreement with the county. The county's finally given us their final updated agreement for the collection agreement. So the next day or two, we'll be sending them out to the different member entities as well too. But we're still on track for getting on the tax roll for next year. So that's the stuff I have.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. Matt didn't have anything.
That's it.
That's it.
All right. Then we go to board member comments. Board member comments. Coletti.
Thank
Director
you, Chair.
Coletti.
Appreciate it. I've got a quick question for staff, and this mainly comes to me because it's on our agenda for Wednesday night. What is the potential liability if this Taxpayer Protection and Accountability Act goes forward, as far as Monterey One Water's ability to raise revenue? And your mention of bonds and all fees are going to be treated as taxes. I'm just wondering what your posture is on this.
So I wish Mike was here because we have had our state lobbyists tracking this, and it depends. Imagine that. It's a depends answer. So my understanding of it, and Jim, have you guys been tracking this as well?
Yeah.
Okay. So on the municipal side of things, I'd love to have the legal perspective of it. it doesn't appear like it's going to change the process within 218 that much for us. Is that true? Because that's what I'm hearing from like Aqua and others.
Doesn't change the process, but it does change, it changes burdens of proof
Right.
in 218 case challenges to a much higher standard. It has other aspects that are really negative for any rate setting agency relative to the being subject to challenges. It doesn't affect the
Doesn't affect the
process per
process
se.
and what we go through. So we go through the same thing. It just opens up some opportunities for challenges. And it seems like much of those have been focused on the water side of things. Is that a fair?
That's fair. Almost all the 218 cases have been water related. It doesn't mean they won't drift, but ever since Capistrano, which was the Orange County case in the water field, there's been just a proliferation of 218 litigation relative to water rates.
But and much of that was on subsidizing between customer classes, which at this point we haven't had issues with. And that's why I guess we're tracking it, but it's not been that much of a focus. So there are other concerns.
No, it's just mostly the heightened exposure to the litigation and the changing and the burden of proof, making it right now the agency, you as an agency have the burden of proof of showing that your rates are proportional and meet all the 218 standards. It just heightens it from to a clear and convincing standard, which makes it much more difficult.
Yeah, there is a lot of litigation around fees.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering what your posture on that particular, I guess the Supreme Court's going to hear it at oral arguments May 8th coming up. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Coletti. Any other board member comments? All right, staff, thank you very much for a good presentation today. We move on to agenda item 12, which is public comment on closed session item. Anyone wishing to address the board on matters appearing on closed session may do so at this time. Please limit your comment to 3 minutes or less. Raise your hand if you're out there in Zoom land. All right, seeing none, then we are going to go into closed session as permitted by Government Code Section 54956 at CEQA. We're going to go into conference with labor negotiators. Thank you all. Jim, you going to do the announcement?
Yeah, it's 9:07. The board has adjourned from closed session and there's no reportable action. Chair Moore, I'll turn it over to you to adjourn the meeting.
I wasn't hearing that. I was hearing him say-
Chair Moore.
We need to adjourn.
Jim, did you make the announcement?
Yes.
I did.
All right, we are at agenda item 15. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.